Welcome back to Enthusiastically Optimistic. In this edition, we focus on the top 5 comics you should read after Superman 2025. Let's get into it. Number 5, Man of Steel. So this may confuse you a little bit, but back in 1984, Superman was reinvented. And so by that I mean there was a version of Superman that predates the Man of Steel comic book. Now, the Man of Steel shouldn't be confused with the movie title, but this reinvention brought Superman into it for a modern audience. First of all, Lex Luthor was reinterpreted as a evil billionaire, essentially a corrupt businessman. Before that, he was a mad scientist, and so there's a change there. Superman himself, they made Krypton much colder, and really the essence of what makes him Superman was his upbringing here on Earth. They even changed to the point where he was brought to Earth in his ship, not as a baby, but almost as a inside of some sort of a matrix. And so he was actually born physically on Earth here, making him, quote unquote, an American. And so from that point forward, we're introduced to a Superman in which Clark Kent is his real nature. It's who he really is, and Superman is like he's like a firefighter basically, puts on his suit and goes out and saves the day. And so it was a radical reinterpretation because before this, we had the story where essentially Superman is the real identity and Clark Kent is just a persona he puts on to fake being human. So this was a radical reinvention of that version. But it's really interesting. This is where we're introduced to really it fleshes out Clark Kent's personal life because he is the main character. And so you have the Daily Planet staff taking a more center stage. You have characters like Cat Grant, Ron Troop, and Steve Lombard introduced into the mythos here. So yeah, it's a really interesting read, especially if you're not familiar with where that whole setup came about. And so the TV series Lois and Clark: The New Adventures of Superman from the '90s really pulled heavily from this reinterpretation of Superman. So if you want to take a look at where this all comes from, oh, plus one of the key differences is his parents are still alive. So instead, we don't have a scene in which Jonathan Kent dies, leaving Clark some vast wisdom. It's simply his parents are still alive. He's well adjusted, had a decent upbringing. He wasn't necessarily picked on when he grew up. He, was a sports star, did a whole lot of stuff. He had a more of a classic, normal, just good old fashioned American upbringing. And so that's this version of Superman. Superman, the Man of Steel, from I think 84, 85 is when that comic was introduced. Number 4, Superman Birthright. So again, we have another reinvention of the Superman mythos. Now, this never caught on in the comics in terms of becoming official canon, maybe briefly for a year or two, but it came out in the 2000s around the same time as Smallville season 3 was dropping. So because Smallville was incredibly popular at the time, it definitely influenced this interpretation, Superman Birthright, that interpretation of the Superman mythos. So we start out in which we were given a glimpse that he and Lex did have some time together back in Smallville. They were friends for a brief moment. It's not as extensive as Smallville, nor does it take exactly from that history, but it definitely was a huge influence on that version of the Superman mythos. So from there, we get a very well-adjusted Clark Kent. Both parents are still alive, like we saw in the Man of Steel comic book. The difference is here we have a Clark Kent that, he travels the world, which he also is very similar to Man of Steel, honestly, in terms of he traveled the world. He was more of a reporter. He enjoyed writing, um, and he wound up rescuing people in secret while he traveled around the world. It's similar to the Man of Steel movie. There's some definite parts that were pulled from this comic book. The difference is this Clark does not seem like as much of an outsider as Man of Steel. That Clark was like he flew under the radar. He wasn't a reporter. He was just kind of trying to find his place. This comic book, he is a reporter. He cares about what's going on in the world around him. He's trying to figure out the best way that he can do some good in the world. And right now, that is basically reporting on what's happening, investigating what's happening, and then also when it comes down, when push comes to shove, he would show up and save the day. He would do so in secret as much as possible, but when his identity would get exposed, then he would have to flee and go on to some other location. Then he doesn't have a Fortress of Solitude. He simply has this tablet, this super advanced Kryptonian tablet that gives him insight into Krypton. The thing is, he can't read Kryptonian. And so at best, he sees these various images, helps him to understand, gets an idea of what Kryptonian life may have been like, but it's very obscure. He doesn't really get it. At the same time, he knows he's inspired by the symbol that he believes means hope. And so he wants to use this symbol to do some good in the world. And so he comes back home to his parents. They talk about it. You see them help him with between his heat vision and Martha's sewing skills. They develop the Superman costume. At the same time, you see him actually become the Metropolis version of Clark Kent. You see them come up with the identity of how he can hide in plain sight, which is a really cool scene in this comic book. We have a genius Lex Luthor again. He's both a savvy businessman, but also eccentric. And some of the Jesse Eisenberg was brought from this Lex, I will admit that. But we get a brilliant Lex Luthor as well. A scientist, he comes with this big plan. It's really interesting. Also, the message from Clark's parents from Krypton does play a role in that comic. Number three, up, and away. So I just came across this comic literally, I think last year. It is, I think, written by Mark Waid. It is a beautiful love letter to Superman. So if you love the character of Superman, you will enjoy this comic book. Unlike the previous version, the previous mentions, this comic is not another origin story. This is about a little girl being kidnapped by aliens. And so the rest of the comic, I believe it's 12 issues in total. I could be wrong. It's either 6 or 12 issues. I don't remember. But the rest of it, the story, is the lengths that Superman goes to save her. And so he leaves Earth, and we get flashbacks to his time on Earth, talking to Lois, trying to figure out what he's going to do. And then the rest of the comic is adventure after adventure that he's having in space on crazy alien worlds, crazy interactions, crazy things. He's going to great lengths just to save this little girl. At the same time, we see the girl herself like praying that, oh, Superman, please save me. Like she believes with all her might that Superman is going to come save her. So it's a beautiful look at how the world views Superman, and it both shows us who he is as a character, and then also the way the world sees him. So it's a phenomenal story, beautiful art, exciting. It's just like I said, it's a fantastic love letter to Superman. Number two, for all seasons. So in interviews, James Gunn actually mentions that this is one of the inspirations for his version of Superman. It's a fantastic story. Again, it's more of an origin slash year one, year two version of Superman, to where we see a little bit of his origin, like his time in Smallville, Kansas. Then we see him in action as Superman, his early days, early interaction with Lex Luthor, things like that. But it's more this the overall vibe. It's such a wholesome Americana version of the character in terms of like the beautiful vistas. Just the artwork by the late Tim Sale is just beautiful. Written by Jeff Loeb. It is I can't say it's not packed full of action, but it gives you character and it gives you just I don't know, it's a very relaxing read, I would say. It's just it's exciting, it's bright, it's colorful, it's inspirational, it's hopeful. This is a very kind-hearted Superman again that we're seeing here. And again, you see everything from his time in Smallville, being Clark Kent. He's revealing who he is, or what his abilities are to Lana Lang. So we get different viewpoints. Like I believe each issue is told from a different perspective. So we get Clark, we get Lana Lang, her perspective. We get Lois's perspective. We get Lex Luthor's perspective. So it's a very well written comic, a phenomenal. Again, it has, I think, the right vibe, that feeling of Superman that we associate with the character. And number one, and my personal favorite, All-Star Superman. So if you followed the development at all for Superman 2025, I'm sure you've heard of All-Star Superman. It is a phenomenal story. One of the best Superman stories I think ever written, um, by Grant Morrison. It is just an enjoyable read. It's phenomenal. I can't say enough good things about it. But again, this is not an origin story. This is essentially Superman's Twilight Song. This is like his final adventures, the final adventures of Superman. You could say it that way. And so it starts off with a Superman that's been around probably 20 plus years. He has a whole bunch of adventures that we will never see, but we get glimpses of references to those previous adventures. We start off with him a daring rescue into the heart of the sun of this scientist. It's all set up by Lex Luthor. This is his end game essentially. And so everything that happens from that point forward was to a degree set up by Lex Luthor in that first issue. Now it's what would Superman do if he knows he's dying, essentially. It's fantastic. Like I love the story. It has that zany, over the top, fantastical feeling that you see in the Superman 2025 film. It's clearly a huge inspiration for what James Gunn did in the movie. You have giant robots, you have monsters, you have alien invasions, you have Bizarro World, you have basically all the crazy, fantastical elements of Superman that for a long time period were absent from the comic books, brought back in this series. And it's exciting, it's fun, it's phenomenal, and it has a beautiful feel to it. There's also a phenomenal issue in which we get a glimpse back when one of the things that motivated Clark to leave Smallville and become Superman. Because at that point he was like a local Superman almost. I think people didn't necessarily see him as much the way the comic implies, but there's a fantastic conversation with his dad that he has in this comic book. And again, you get the sense that James Gunn also pulled Ma and Pa Kent from some elements from this comic as well. They're not modern characters at all. They're very, they feel like old-fashioned farmers, just good old country people. And it's such a great comic book, honestly. And even outside the comic book, there is an animated movie of All Star Superman. So it's a more truncated version. They took the core elements of the comic book in 12 issues and put it in like a less than 2 hour movie. But it has been phenomenal. It is one of my favorite animated movies of all time. So if you don't feel like reading the comic book, you can just track down the animated film, All Star Superman. You will love it, I promise you. And I'll note one thing: the ending of All Star Superman, the film, I think, is actually an improvement from the ending of the comic book, specifically in connection with Lex Luthor. Also, slight spoiler warning, so I warn you in advance. The speech that Clark gives Lex at the end of Superman 2025 is very similar to an interaction that they have in Superman and All Star Superman. And I wonder if James Gunn is setting up something along the lines of the conclusion from All Star Superman later on for his Lex Luthor, this version of Lex Luthor from the movie. I could be totally wrong about that, but there's something about the way the dialogue plays out that seems like he could easily be setting up this story arc that we see in All Star Superman for Lex. So that's all I'm gonna say. I won't give any more spoilers, but that I believe that could be set up in the future, possibly. But anyway, those are my top 5 selections of comics you should definitely check out if you enjoyed Superman 2025. That does it for this session. Until then, stay enthusiastically optimistic.